everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of the Flipgrid series, Ask Yaritza. I'm excited today because I get to be with someone that I'm like a huge fan of on Twitter, Coach Victor Hicks. How are you?
I'm good, Yaritza. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm excited because we get to speak about computer science today. But before we get into the viewer question, what would you like to tell the audience about yourself?
Well, actually, I think, I always love to give the background of, computer science was totally not my field of expertise. Come from many years of step coaching, teaching, big background in the fine arts, teaching pretty much everything under the sun, every grade level. And interestingly enough, my father was in computer science, and all the years as a kid, never really caught the bug. But once I started teaching it when I moved here from Chicago to Atlanta about 6 years ago, I mean, just the amount of, I would say, out of all the things that I've taught, it's just the amount of growth that you really see kids get from computer science that, has kind of made it my new passion. So, yeah.
So first of all, I love that. Last week was Computer Science Education Week. It actually just ended yesterday. And I'm scrolling up and down Twitter, and I realized that a lot of folks who teach computer science were just like, computer science is not gaming. So before I even ask the viewer question, can you tell us the difference, or at least tell us exactly what computer science is?
Okay. So I really think, when we talk about computer science, it really kind of, when we look at the K-12 umbrella, what we're really trying to get students to understand, and the if I could give you like one phrase that we want them to take away, is computational thought. When we look at the 21st century, and what the workforce will ask for, what learning will look like, what higher education will look like, are these very specific skills. And so they come from some of the same processes that students use to code, and I guess to give you the short answer, coding is a part of. So that, there's this big umbrella of 21st century skills that we want kids to have. Coding fits under there. So it's kind of one of the ways that the kids actually practice. So you would say, kids are, learning French, reading and having dialogue within French education is important to learn the whole thing. But I think that gaming is, when we wanted kids to get excited about it, it definitely has a place because it's catch for some kids. You know what I'm saying? Right. It definitely is that entry point. It's one of the ways to get kids excited about it. I think where we've kind of lost perspective a little bit is it's become the only way. You know what I mean? And transitioning the kids, and I love seeing it from elementary to middle, is that once the kids come out of the hour of code, typical kind of gamified ways of learning computer science, you go right back to that same digital divide, because now it's no longer, I wouldn't say fun and games, but it's not presented in this same way, and so we lose perspective of kind of those skills in the delivery sometimes.
So I actually like that you said fun and games, because that's exactly what it is to most students, right? And that's honestly the only part that they're exposed to. So our viewer question for today is, what are culturally responsive focused computer science strategies that I can use in my classroom? When I saw this question, the first person I thought about was you. When we think
about culturally responsive, we got you.
Yes, I thought about you. Not only is it because you talk about this all the time on social media, but also when I think about culturally responsive teaching, I think about Dr. Geneva Gay, who coined the phrase, right? And she basically focused on Black and Latino males. What do we have to do differently to get them engaged? When I think about computer science, and I even take it a step further, think about math and science, I think about Black and Latino males, not really achieving much in those areas. And so engagement, I'm like, Coach Hicks. I have to go to Coach Hicks, because we know that some strategies to even get kids involved is just relevancy. Where are we creating those opportunities for students of color to see themselves? So what is one strategy you would say is a culturally responsive strategy that can be used in computer science?
I would say one of the ones, and I want to speak to the point that you just brought up, especially like with our Black and Latino males. I would say that the great part about my experience with computer science is, even in these, the relatively short time I've been doing it, I've been able to teach K-8. I've been able to teach, two very different sides of the spectrum here in Atlanta, from a very affluent school to a very, and again, I don't use the coin phrases. I mean, my geniuses that I am blessed to teach right now is a very striking contrast in population. What I think about, and again, going back to the computational thought, is allowing student agency. There are so many entry points. If we look, again, we broaden our view of what computational thought and problem solving looks like. For example, I have a student who, academics is really just not it. We're going to high school next year. We're going to high school after a pandemic, which is, of course, so just, but hey, we'll be okay. But all that to say, the hour of code is not going to get to him. Video games aren't really his thing. Music is his passion. Fortunately enough, there's so many different resources out here. And again, we just kind of open our minds to giving our kids those problem solving skills. There is an ear sketch program, which fortunately does push in code, but I had to, I guess, deliver that message from a different perspective, because what I said to him is the music thing is great, but we have to come out of just the creativity. That's the spark. You love it. You're talented. It's something that you're very good at. Okay, so now as your computer science teacher, how do I pull that problem solving into that? So I found Ear Sketch, which was free. I do a whole lot of Googling because I started out. The great part about starting out without a curriculum, you learn that the resource set very quickly. Right. And so I was able to have these sessions with this kid who then went off and began solving problems on his own. So we went from the very structured lessons, because I didn't know what this Ear Sketch, this music create thing was, but I was learning along with him. My job as the teacher then became to become the facilitator. So this is now a kid who, is like, okay, hey, I'm solving problems. I want to create this hook. I want to create this, so many bars. I want to put this beat in here. How do I? So now I'm still using decomposition, because I'm taking a larger problem and I'm breaking it into skill sets. You see what I'm saying? I'm writing an algorithm. I'm this algorithmic thought. Now, if I said that same thing to that child and put him on, a coding website, he'd be looking at me like I was crazy. Coach Hick, you tripping, But the great part about it is, and I think, like I said, when I look at Black and Latino males, where I have a vested interest in, because these are young men who look a lot and come from very similar backgrounds that I did, is that now I feel a little bit better about carrying him over to high school, because here's a kid who was by society, and again, not to use the coin terms, at risk. I can now hand him to a CTAE teacher who he is naturally connected with. Right. Now it's not just about this is something I'm passionate about. You understand what I'm saying? I'm still problem solving. I'm still being able to, and again, market myself now in the 21st century to be successful, because this is not a kid who, he loves all the HBCU stuff I talk about, Coach, and we've had the conversation. That's not something that I think is in my path. But I now know this child has a very marketable skill. He gonna make more money than me. Right. But I think, and that's why I say, like, it's crucial that these kids understand the bigger picture. Like, yeah, if coding is it, go for it. But if web design, or just that, you being able to think creatively of ways to solve problems, like, our boys have to, I mean, not just our boys, but all of our kids have to.
Right. Right. And what you just said is just spot on to what coaching responsive teaching is. So I feel like sometimes you have educators who they're stuck on this curriculum path, right? And if my curriculum doesn't state it, I don't want to do it. And if that kid says that he doesn't want to try it, guess what? I'm going to make him try it, because that's what the curriculum says. And what I'm trying to do is get educators to think outside of the box, because at this point, 2020, everything is outside of the box, right? You and I were backstage and we were talking about there's no such thing as a norm. No. And so when we think about relevancy and we think about student interest, it's all diverse, it's all different. And we have to be able to speak to who our students are as individuals. Exactly. And so if we even think about another strategy, for me, it's the most common sense strategy there is. You have to offer computer science in schools. And many schools and districts don't. Another thing that we mentioned backstage was the fact that 58% of new jobs that's available is in STEM. If you were to ask my students who I'm currently teaching right now, are they ready to join the workforce beyond working at Target, beyond working at Walmart, which is nothing wrong with those jobs, but they're not bringing home what we say the bacon, right? Right. And so Are they ready for that workforce? No, because there's no exposure to that content.
Exactly.
So, in following you on Twitter, right? Because I said, like, I'm always on your page.
Right.
I love that everything about you is responsive, right? And
absolutely.
People need to understand there's a difference between relevance and being responsive. A responsive educator is an educator that understands their students and you're responding to those needs, right? Exactly. And so I also know that you love to talk about HBCUs. That's like your thing.
I'll let her open those floodgates. Everybody, like, here goes Coach Hick, like my fourth grade. It's like, wait, there it goes. Yep, see, I knew it. We're supposed to say something about the HBCU today.
So, and that being said, you touched on something that I believe is near and dear to my heart: problem solving. Computer science is problem solving, but it allows students to engage in problem solving in a way that they themselves are taking charge of their own learning.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you would give to teachers on, even introducing problem solving or computer science in their classrooms?
The thing, and like I said, I think it really goes back to, allowing, teachers really allowing student agency. And I mean, that's a great side effect of, and I think, for me, coming from, like we were saying backstage, just that very industrial revolutionary kind of style of education, is that it made me kind of open my mind and say, okay, well, Hicks, in order for these kids to be, successful and to get the skills that they need, you have to become this facilitator. It's not about you. Like, you're not giving the same structure, that you were doing as a Title I interventionist, all those kind of things. So I think the first thing to do is allow kids to determine their entry point. Many things that you look at, social studies, is taking, even if you just have the kids go through a period that you might be studying. Okay, let's look at this. You're being tasked and to solve this problem. So, again, going through those basic four pillars for the decomposition. If we're looking at what happened, the causes of the Civil War, you were mediating the Civil War cause. Like, they never have to touch a computer. It's the computational thought you want them to, allow themselves to do. Now, I think so when we talk about integrating into the core subjects, that's where it ties into the ELA. And like I said, I tell kids all the time, my teaching the actual computer science, the core skills, I find ELA a lot. It's a language. Let's look at structure. Okay, so if I forget to put a period at the end of a statement, is my paragraph correct? So I think those are the ways to teach it when we talk about integration. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a technology, computer science standalone program, that's where we can really kind of flesh it out. We can get creative, And I think, like I said, keep going back to that point, it's important to allow students to kind of navigate their entry point into it. Your gamer kids are going to be your easy kids. They're going to be the ones like, yes, Angry Birds, mine, all the things, But I think, like, one of the most powerful experiences is one of my 7th grade girls, where I'm currently now, and bright kid, but she's into hair. Look, Coach Hick needs to put this moisturizer. Just really. And so when she came to me, and so one day, just I could just tell she wasn't there. I said, well, honey, what are we going to do to get you? Because you're too bright. And I feel like there's something that Coach needs to be, helping you. And she said, well, Coach Hicks, I'm doing hair. I'm going to do a hair business. And this 12-year-old kid basically laid out this, business plan to me. And this, I'm like, okay, Hicks, I need you to come out with pray into the education guys. Like, please, mentor this kid. And I said, well, honey, here's the thing. I said, well, Coach Hicks is getting ready to retire because you're going to be paying me a lot of money. And of course, in the middle school, teach it. And I said, well, because you're going to have to pay me. I said, you're going to keep your business in Atlanta. We looking at, one-stop shop. Are we looking to make this into? She's like, no, Coach Hicks, I'm going to be selling hair and da-da-da. I said, well, honey, here's the thing. Somebody got to build your website. I said, the thing about it is that you're going to have to pay somebody. I said, you're going to be giving Coach Hicks a good 20, 30, I'm going to be able to retire from teaching.
Right.
3 hours of work a day on your business. And that's going to be this. And so, of course, you saw the middle school mind. Now, I still don't get credit for the idea, but that baby would do HTML. She was coming into my class like, look what I did, Coach. And I figured out how to put a carousel. And so here's computational thought,
Right.
And so I had to be willing to let go of my, I still, again, that differentiation piece, right? So my kids, that my general lessons are here, but that baby, she was, Coach, I'm trying to put on my, I'm trying to design this website. Hey, what do you think about this? She's getting the same problem solving skills. It wasn't my curriculum. that child wasn't on my lesson plan anywhere, but I know that she's going to do something with that. You know what I'm saying? That's a very powerful skill for her to, even if she never builds her own website, but now as she builds that business or whatever she decides to do, she understands that thought process and how I need to collaborate and how I need to think about things in an order, in a sequential order, and how to, when I run into snags, what is the process to problem solve through those? So it's powerful stuff.
Listen, it's powerful. And as you're speaking, I also looked at one of our viewers, Jill, had mentioned, the administration and the system. And there's a huge need for change. And sometimes educators don't do certain things because they feel like it doesn't help test scores. And Jill, I agree. But then you have it where we have to be very cognizant of where we want our kids to be after they graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Test scores are not going to help our students become successful or as successful as they helped us. And I say us because I have to think about myself at some point. But then, like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I don't remember what I learned in some classes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like my teachers eating sandwiches and stuff. Like those were things that I graduated high school, raving about. But if you really sat down and asked me, like, Yaritza, what are some skills that you learned besides writing? I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Actual
takeaway skill. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so as teachers, we have to still provide that opportunity, even if it's 10 minutes in the class, even if it's 15 minutes. Like I know last year for me, I taught history, but I was like, I need to buy the Lego sets and I need students to sit in front of computers and build things. This is in history. So yeah, we're talking about Henry Ford's Model T car. Now I need my kids to build the car, then take it apart, and then build whatever they want after.
Right.
And so we have to create those opportunities.
But I think too, and like I said, I would even take it a step further. I mean, I think that and I hope that as we keep talking about, I think we're in a very, very special place. If we look at this current pandemic, and the positive point is that I think we're in a very, very valuable, if handled the right way, position where education can start changing what it needs to address this current time. Our past system, like we were talking about backstage, addressed the Industrial Revolution, right?
Yeah.
Is that process quickly and just, basically keep these factories full. We're as teachers, as admins, we've gone to conferences, we've read books, everything is talking about 21st century learning and this new environment, right? Well, I think that COVID, what part of the, because I feel like everything happens for a reason. One of the benefits, I guess, so to speak, was it was like, hey, y'all, this is it. Y'all don't have to drag your feet anymore. It's 2020. Like these kids have now. You got because again, we're comfortable, right? So if I'm scared to incorporate technology in this different kind of thought, but also I would take it a step further and say for a lot of the kids that are traditionally lower performers, for whatever reason, sometimes that hands-on, sometimes that computational thought, sometimes that problem-based solve or approach teaching the same curriculum they have to spit out on that test, that helps them get it.
I agree.
And like when you start taking out things, there's concepts. If I had time to comb in all of the different ELA and math and social studies and science standards that I touch on in my, design of HBCU PBL unit like we're doing right now. A lot of my kids are getting it. So when they're designing that campus, because now they've bought in, because Coach Hicks had that you're doing TikToks and you're designing school colors and mascots and websites and, but now I'm also one of the decided you're also building this campus on virtually, on Tinkercad. So now you weren't hearing Miss Such and Such talk about area, but now because you've bought into this, you're designing this campus to scale. So you're doing this hands-on practice. You weren't doing the worksheet in Google Classroom, but because this is now something you're interested in, you understand what I'm saying? You've bought into this idea, this new way of really kind of thinking. Again, it's going to make an employee a better college student, a better, as a side effect. I just think we can't be afraid to shift, and stop letting STEAM be a buzzword. I love the idea that schools are doing a lot of the certifications, but see, I think what the side effect of that is that people equate STEAM with magnets. So if STEAM is a thing, it's like if world languages is not my thing, it's like, no, y'all, no. It has to be your thing. There should be, every school should be a STEAM school. There should be no, there should be no, not in 2020.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. First of all, can I be a student in your class? I just wanted to get that out the way.
We don't know. Our zone is come on.
But also, what I wanted to end with was what you just said. You know, it should be everywhere. It should be offered everywhere, regardless of anything. I know New York, we have computer science for all programs where we rolled it out. Every school should offer computer science. Same thing with STEAM. Same thing with STEM. It's offered. It's just admin now has to say thank you. Thank you for these free resources, right? Because that's another thing. To offer it and not have resources is almost like you have to have the resources.
You know, but I think to be very honest, Yaritza, I think one of the things that we're going to have to do with computer science is that we're going to have to pull it out of, if we're really looking at full integration and really getting the most, at least for the next few years. I think we're going to have to pull it out of the electives specials realm, because the problem is that when it's most critical. So elementary, like in my administration, I would say, I'm blessed to, because they get it. And I'm like, hey, the whole school's building them. They're like, okay, coach, conversation. Okay, coach, we got you. You know, but the thing of it is that we also operate in a very, unique model, because we're K through 8 and we're charter school here in Atlanta. So, our executive director. So anyway, but long story short, to go back to that point about the electives, is that oftentimes if kids haven't bought in, it's now a choice. So if I'm in middle school, you understand what I'm saying? And computer science isn't my thing. If it's not integrated into my day-to-day, you know what I'm saying? I say still offer the very specified course, but also let's start figuring out ways to plug it into social studies and to plug it into music, to plug it into, because again, you don't necessarily want them to, I think when it's taught as an elective, it's because again, I have a set of standards of my own, right? Things that kids have to understand about networks and, digital safety and all those kind of things, versus again, that more abstract computational thought where you can integrate that into all subject matter. You understand what I'm saying? And that way we don't lose kids into that. Because again, like I said, when it starts to get specified, coding is a niche, and it gets some kids and then it loses others. But there's so many other, like we keep, coming back to that point, those entry points. So again, I think, integrating it into pulling it out of the specials realm, or in addition to the specials realm, really getting our classroom and our core content teachers to, start getting our kids just again. And the way people have to say, hey, Hicks, what's the one way to get computer science into my classroom? Problem solving activities. Like it can be unplugged. They don't even have to necessarily be on the computer, program give me a list of instructions to, navigate the conflict between the North and the South.
Right.
Give me, 6 steps from what, in sequential order, how we could have done X, Y, and Z.
You are dropping the gems, and we could have this conversation for hours.
Part 2, right? The after party.
Yes, I'm saving everything else for the after party. Absolutely. So, Coach, thank you so much for this session. You've enlightened me as always. Guys,
thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for saying yes. And guys, thank you again for tuning in for episode 12 of Ask Yaritza. I'm wishing you all a great, great, great night.